Take.
2 out of 7 Apple, take 1 out from Bravo Marcus.
Mark.
The biggest challenge, I think, would probably have to be the Terrible Room. It's called the Terrible Room because that's the character of the place. It's a place where Leonardo's character is being held hostage, where he's threatened with beheading. It had very specific physical requirements, but at the same time it had a very strong emotional ambience that it had to achieve. And we scouted that for a very long time until my art director, Marco Trentini, on his day off, happened to be driving along the coast road and passed an old Portuguese fort, which people are living in. And he was curious enough to go in there and see what was happening with it. Looking at the rooms that were available, found that the building was much larger and deduced that there must be more to it, and discovered a door that had been bricked up, and then got permission to demolish the brick and take the door to wherever it led, which was to another set of rooms, which is where we're doing the scene. So in that sense of exploration and discovery after a long cycle of frustrated scouting and eventually finding the absolutely perfect location, that's my favorite.
At one point, it was at the beginning of the schedule, then it moved along 2 weeks, and it moved along another 2 weeks, and then it moved along again, and then it kept moving along again. And everyone kept saying, are we going to do this terrible room? And then in the schedule, it would say, terrible room, it would say, another terrible room, and then it would say, a room somewhere, another room somewhere. And everyone was very confused as to whether the terrible room and a room somewhere were the same room, or whether there another room somewhere plus another room somewhere was actually another code word for terrible room, but so we didn't really know. And so that went on for weeks and weeks until finally we did shoot the terrible room.
Go the other way. Yeah, that way. Come a little forward. Yeah. Yes.
The terrible room was an interesting set to do because there was nothing in it. All I was having to provide was a grotty table, a grotty chair, video camera, a bowl, a little towel and a razor, and possibly a flag showing sort of Arabic slogan. It took more time to get those props together than it did for anything else, because it's all these things go through your head when you're doing something with Ridley that you think, well, what sort of table is it, though? Is it a metal top table? Is he going to like that? Or should it be a sort of, when he says grotty table, does that mean a grotty wooden table? And how big is that table? And where's that table come from? And the chair, is the chair repaired? Does it have no seat to it, but it's got a funny old pillow on it? No pillow, because that would be uncomfortable. And in the end, we actually ended up using something that came from the prop warehouse and a funny old chair. But it was actually a very important scene in the film because it is actually a climactical scene, and the film at that point could go one way or the other.
That torture scene, we'll call it, is a scene that I really ramped myself up for months in advance, and I knew my character had to be representative of somebody that was very passionately trying to solve these problems, but had an extreme hatred for the violence that these terrorists were capable of, and what would he do in a situation where he was confronted with them. And the scene that we actually did was about 2 days, and it was in this sort of tomb in the middle of in the middle of Morocco. It was one of those scenes that you so ramp yourself up for and put so much thought and energy into, and think about what that character would actually say in that environment, that it becomes completely physically exhausting and draining. So there's always 1 or 2 scenes like that in a movie, and I usually get sick after them. And that happened with this scene. I mean, we were intensely screaming at each other, and it became very realistic in that sense, and your body just sort of shuts down afterwards. But it was a scene that we put a lot of thought to, and knew that if it wasn't done right and wasn't as horrific and realistic as a lot of the accounts of what we heard these situations were like, the movie ultimately wouldn't have the same gravitas, wouldn't have the same validity.
I was really concerned about the last scene, concerned in regards of taking care of my character, you know. Going into this scene, what he really wants to do is to see if he can get something out of him also. But also to look at your enemy in the eye and to tell him, you know, I beat you. I'm sorry that you're dead. Even though, you know, I played compassion, it came out like, whoa. I tried to bring this inside. Not that anybody knows, but when you try that, you get something soft, which maybe audience don't really understand, and, you know, it's not there, but it goes like underneath. I'm not going to torture you, Mr. Ferris. I see you're not going to read what is prepared for you on paper. It's all right. All I need from you, I already have. And that's you.
Also, even when he comes face to face finally with this man, Al-Salim, what's interesting about the scene between the two men, it's like he's looking into the face of this man they really consider to be, you know, the root of a lot of evil that's befallen this part of the world. And it was important to show how people's different realities create these divides. You really need to be able to understand both sides. And it doesn't justify, you know, the actions, but it will help toward understanding and being able to have a dialogue.
And Leo's dedicated to the job and is open. We exchange ideas. I told him this, he told me that. And he has this passion, which I like very much. He has it in real life, and he has it in his work. And when he came today and we did his side, you could tell, like, he's like, he's out there. He wants, and he's really exploring, and he's really into it.
These men behind you, who you say are dispensable, huh? The ones who blow themselves up in the name of Allah. There is no place in the Quran for the murder of innocent people and suicide. You know that.
I think as we've played the scenes more and more, I've had to try and find, and Ridley's kind of encouraged me to find a real balance between he's not completely a good guy, he's not completely a bad guy. You know, it's all about smoke and mirrors in Intelligence. But Honey, yeah, I mean, to some extent, he dangles Ferris as bait at the end, despite having formed a very close relationship with him, and despite trusting him to some extent and expecting to be trusted. There's a lot of double dealing in everything, but there's a scene where he just saves him at the last minute, and really just took me aside before we shot the scene. He said, just ask yourself whether you were on time or whether you were actually waiting outside the door for 10 minutes. So we liked the idea that he could have been in there quicker, but just allowed him to go right to the edge, Ferris's character to feel what it's like to go right to the edge. And then Honey comes in as the cavalry.